Chapter 91, Repairs, Hanyu's POV. Antony was practically hiding from him, so Hanyu didn't take long to get ready for the day's activities. In fact, he was so speedy that when he and Bunta arrived on the upper deck, no one else was there yet. Well, none of his own cadre, at least. Older men were dotted over the deck, doing their own exercises, talking with each other, or simply wandering by themselves and savoring the fresh air. Hanyu couldn't help staring. It was hard to believe that all these men had once been offerings like him. Most were dressed for work, plain clothes pulled over broad shoulders and generous bellies, sturdy sandals, or even boots clomping under their confident, purposeful strides. Even the ones who wore the fine robes of personal attendants moved with a graceful assurance that seemed like the exact opposite of anything Hanyu could ever muster. Had any of them ever felt like they had no idea what they were doing? Like something wonderful was crumbling through their fingers and they had no idea how to stop it? Probably not. Probably you didn't have to worry so much anymore once you were older. Bunta's voice interrupted his envious revere. Hanyu? I don't mean to pry, but you're so quiet today. Are you all right? Oh, Bunta, Hanyu cried, realizing all at once how badly he'd been wanting someone to ask him that. Everything's going wrong, and I don't know if Lord Antony is going to keep me anymore. I'm so awful at behaving myself. The older man's face darkened. He stepped forward and put a hand on Hanyu's shoulder, comforting despite the hard light in his eyes. That monster, he gritted out. If that whiny little fucker has started ignoring you, Hanyu, I swear I'll... His voice trailed off. Hanyu waited for a moment, intrigued to hear what sort of threats Bunta would make against a god. When it became obvious that the older man wasn't going to continue, however, he sprang belatedly to his master's defense. No, not exactly. In fact, Hanyu paused, running the days of Antony's and Esau's recovery through his mind. I think I may have been ignoring him for a while there, now that you mention it. Bunta squinted at him for a moment, his sharp eyes searching Hanyu's face. Then he did the strangest thing. His face crinkled up, his eyes softened and glinted delightedly, and he snickered. The snicker turned into a chuckle, which grew into a deep, rumbling belly laugh. Hanyu stared at him, aghast. Oh, Hanyu, Bunta said at last, wiping a tear from his eye. Bless you! Anything you need, any time, you just tell me. Bunta, Hanyu whined, but the older man just shook his head and snickered again. Sorry, I'm not the best person to talk to about this. Maybe you could discuss it with Kenta. But Kenta's not here yet. Everyone was being so weird today, and Hanyu hadn't had enough sleep to be gracious about it. Sure he is, come on. Bunta turned away from the opening that Hanyu would expect Kenta to emerge from and led him towards the other end of the deck. This ship was too big. Ordinarily, Hanyu enjoyed the expansive deck that gave him so much room for running and exercising, but not today. Today he was tired and sad and grouchy, and nothing pleased him. There was a perverse satisfaction in acknowledging his own bad mood, and he nursed it until he and Bunta were close enough to the helm for him to make out the figure standing at the wheel. Kenta! Hanyu cried, running the last few yards. You're steering the ship! He'd known that his friend was being trained for this, but it was an entirely different matter to actually see him doing it. Kenta, soft, round Kenta, standing at the wheel and commanding this entire floating behemoth. His hair was pulled back severely, but a few strands had escaped to dance around his face in the breeze. His hands were sure and steady on the wheel. He looked like a grown man, a hero, and Hanyu's jaw was sagging with awe by the time they reached him. Oh, hello, Hanyu. Kenta blushed and beamed as they approached. Look at you, Hanyu cried. You're amazing. Kenta hunched his shoulders and stared down at his shoes, but he was grinning. It's not so impressive. This is the first time I've been allowed to steer on my own. You're doing wonderfully, Bunta assured him. I'll leave you two alone now. Have a nice morning. You look like a statue or a painting, Hanyu marveled once the older man had left. So certain. Kenta glowed under his admiration, but Hanyu's first flush of awe was quickly curdling into envy. He tried to stamp the feeling down. Kenta had been unreservedly happy for him in all his successes. Hanyu owed him the same kind of support. But here was Kenta steering the ship of the gods, while Hanyu couldn't even manage to please one indulgent master. "It's actually kind of fun," Kenta confided with a grin. "I definitely prefer sailing lessons to all the lessons we got back at the temple." Hanyu's determined goodwill deflated. "I should have paid more attention to those lessons, I'm afraid." "What do you mean?" Kenta asked. His friend's immediate willingness to turn the conversation to talk of him intensified Hanyu's guilt, but he needed this talk too badly to quibble. He accepted the offer as the gift it was and plunged ahead. "Oh, Kenta, I've been trying to behave better for the last few days, but I'm fucking it up, and Lord Antony and Asao are losing their patience with me. Now Lord Antony is barely talking to either of us and leaving the rooms all night to go who knows where, and even when we greet him properly, he just ends up getting upset." Kenta blinked. "But wait, I'm sorry, I'm confused. Why are you behaving differently now? You said he liked it when you called him by his name and talked whenever you wanted." "Well, yes." A pang pierced Hanyu at the memory of those happier, simpler times. "But Asao's there now, and he's so good. I feel like an oaf next to him." "Everyone feels like an oaf next to Asao." Kenta waved a dismissive hand. "It doesn't mean you have to change how you treat Lord Antony, not if you were both happy with the way things were." Hanyu groaned. "Maybe he was happy with it, but he won't be now that he sees how perfect Asao is." "Then he'd tell you, wouldn't he?" "Maybe?" Shrugging helplessly, Hanyu started to pace. "He's not like Lord Theodora, or me, for that matter. He doesn't just say things." Kenta hesitated, his fingers tapping nervously over the great wooden wheel. "Hanyu, can I be a little blunt?" There was a sentence to make a listener nervous. Still, Hanyu found himself intrigued against his will. Kenta had never been one for bluntness. Lord Theodora must be rubbing off on him. "All right," he assented. "I don't think you're doing this to please Lord Antony," Kenta said slowly, as if he were sorting through all the words he knew to make sure he picked just the right ones. "He's already told you how he likes things to be for you two. I think you're acting more formal because you want to please Asao." Hanyu scoffed. "What? That's ridiculous. Asao already knows how I am. It's much too late to impress him." "But he's always been the person you worried about impressing," Kenta argued. "You've gotten so much bolder and more confident since we got here, but not around Asao. As soon as he shows up, you can't even focus on anybody else. Maybe not even Lord Antony." Hanyu stood for a moment, thunderstruck. Was that true? It seemed impossible that he would prioritize Asao over a god, much less his own beloved master. That was definitely blasphemy, as well as being ridiculous. But the more he mulled over the last week, the better Kenta's guess seemed to fit. The truth was, he hadn't thought much about Antony since Asao came to live with them. At least, he hadn't thought about Antony as Antony, only as the god whose favor could be squabbled over, a medal that would inevitably be awarded to one or the other of them. He hadn't given a single thought to Antony's actual feelings or preferences since Asao had brought up the idea of first slaves. Well, damn, it was true. He cared more about what Asao wanted than what Antony wanted. He'd measured himself against Asao his whole life. Compared to that, his service to Antony had been only a blip, easily cast aside once his old friend joined them. Tearing himself from his thoughts, he turned to Kenta. "Shit, thanks." "I'm sorry," Kenta pleaded, eyes wide. "I didn't want to overstep. Sorry, No, I mean it." Hanyu reached out and squeezed his hand, thrilling a little at the way his fingers brushed the ancient wood of the wheel. "Thank you. You're right. I'll talk to him." Kenta exhaled. "Oh, good. I'm so glad. Which him?" "Antony." It was so nice to say the name without correcting himself. Do you think, Kenta started, but then he was interrupted by a chorus of voices calling their names. Jen, Taiki, and the others jogged up the deck towards them, already chattering about how impressive Kenta was at the wheel and pelting Hanyu with questions about what had happened and whether Asao was really living with him now. It was easy to get swept up in their talk and camaraderie. Once their exercises started in earnest, Hanyu also had to admit that he enjoyed the fresh air, sunshine, and exertion. Antony had been right to insist that he go. Antony. The thought of him never entirely left Hanyu's mind, no matter how much he savored the morning. His thoughts were so fixed on Antony that it almost didn't surprise him when, as their session ended and he filed towards the stairs with the others, he heard a familiar commotion below decks. "Yes, keep going. Hello, don't stop. Yes, it's me again. Go on now." Instantly, Hanyu felt his insides turn soft and warm, and his eyes itched a warning of coming tears. Oh, yes, please, please, yes. There he was at the foot of the stairs, so small and ill at ease and gloriously real, glowering ferociously as he gestured for Hanyu's wide-eyed cadre mates to pass. Then it all blurred as tears filled Hanyu's eyes, and he just let the crowd sweep him down the stairs and right to Antony. Antony was still just a silver haze by the time Hanyu came to stand before him, so he couldn't see the look his master gave him in return for the grin stretching his own cheeks. "My lord!" he cried, just as the first tears started dripping. "Oh dear!" Antony's voice was concerned, and it was such a dear, familiar tone that Hanyu cried harder. "What happened?" "Nothing, my lord," Hanyu assured him, laughing a little and swiping at his cheeks. "I'm just so happy to see you. It's good crying." Antony hesitated, then, "Oh." He sounded so shocked that Hanyu was surprised in his turn. Was it really so astonishing that he would be happy to see his master? His throat twinged guiltily as Antony put a hand on his arm and started drawing him down the hallway. "In here," the god said, when he opened a door that definitely didn't lead to their rooms. Hanyu's tears had slowed enough that he could see the space behind the door, and it wasn't impressive. It appeared to be a storage closet, lined on all sides with crates. Antony stood in the middle, his slight frame taking up at least a third of the available space. Hanyu squeezed in with him, and Antony reached to shut the door. Instantly, they were thrown into darkness, only the tiniest slivers of torchlight showing through the door's cracks. "Sorry," the god said. "I know it's cramped, but we can be alone here. And, well, I just had to ask you without Asao there. What did I do wrong? I'm sorry. I know I ought to be able to figure it out on my own, but I can't. Whatever it was, I'm so sorry, Hanyu. If you'll just tell me, I swear I'll do whatever I can to make it right, but I need to know what I did." His voice stayed level, but even so, there was a pleading note in it that Hanyu had rarely heard from Antony. He wasn't quite begging the way he had with Marcus, but he wasn't far off either. What in the world? Hanyu would have given blood for the ability to see his face. "You didn't do anything," he assured his master. "What do you mean?" Now Antony sounded panicky. "Did I scare you? Is that it? The bowing and the priest talk, did I scare you or piss you off or—" "Oh, no!" Hanyu blundered forwards. He tried to pull Antony close for a hug, but miscalculated in the dark and smacked his face instead. "No, that wasn't you! I was actually going to talk to you about that today. It was scaring Asao when I called you by your name and stood up without permission and all that. But I shouldn't have changed things without talking to you. I'm so sorry. I never meant to make you think I was angry. Gods, Antony, what would I even be angry at you for?" Hanyu had him now, his arms wrapped tightly around the god's small, chilly form. Antony was characteristically stiff at first, but as Hanyu talked, he felt his master relaxing, going soft and pliant in his embrace. By the time Hanyu paused for a breath, Antony was actually leaning into him. "Oh," the god said at last. "Well, I should have realized. Good to have that cleared up. I suppose—" His voice cracked, hitched over a sob, and Hanyu was thunderstruck to realize that he was crying too. "Oh no!" He clutched his god even tighter. "Oh, Antony, I'm sorry." "Sorry. Antony stammered at the same time. I'm being ridiculous. I didn't know what I'd done or how to fix it. I missed you. You're important, so important to me, and I'm sorry. Oh, gods, he'd been scared. Hanyu had known Antony was feeling awkward and confused, but it hadn't even occurred to him that his master might be scared. What in the world did a god have to be scared of? Just what he said. He was scared of making me angry, scared that his foolish human slave hated him. 1,000 years old, powerful as a tide, and he's in tears because he was so afraid that he'd hurt me. Antony was hugging him back now, almost clinging, and small wet noises in the darkness indicated that he was crying even harder now. Was it wrong to love his tears? Probably, but Hanyu did. He loved his tears and his fears and his clasping arms that trembled with the effort to hold Hanyu's fragile body gently. Loved it all with a force that shocked him. The moment was too perfect to last. Antony finally stiffened, patted Hanyu's back awkwardly, and stepped out of his embrace. Hanyu heard his master's back hit a crate. All right, yes, good. Antony cleared his throat, and Hanyu was distantly aware, through the haze of his own joy, that the god's tone was tight with panic under all his control. What was that about? Let's go back now. Asao was sleeping when I left, but I don't like to leave him alone for too long. He's having a hard time. You're kind to consider his comfort. I don't mind if you want to keep up the bowing and all that, now that I know why you're doing it, but maybe try to toss in a smile or something now and then, so I don't start worrying again? All right, Hanyu chirped again. And now you'll come back to bed, won't you? Antony hesitated, opening the closet door before answering. Hanyu blinked at the sudden flood of torchlight. As his eyes cleared, he saw that Antony's whole body was tense, and his lips were tight and troubled. All right, the god whispered at last. I'll come back to bed. His tone might have been strangely funeral, but that was all right. Everything was all right. Everything was wonderful, because they had talked and hugged, and Antony was coming back to bed. Hanyu practically floated the rest of the way through the now deserted halls.